about. One is to be aware of how much you're speaking. So if you're somebody who speaks a lot, we want to hear your voice. And if you're like me, I'm somebody who processes out loud, and I need to tell myself to step back and allow little spaces to happen sometimes. Speak from your own authentic experience, while you're also aware of some of the ways that you may hold privilege. And we really are working on becoming a community that learns how to challenge oppression and racism as it happens in the moment, or even after it happens. And one of the things I think I would say about that is it's really a learning process, and it takes all of us working on it and practicing together to get better at catching ourselves and catching each other in the moment and correcting ourselves and learning and moving forward. Next slide. So today's agenda, we're in the welcome, update, and introductions section. Then we will be hearing about the Alliance Youth Think Tank and actually doing some kind of small group introductions after that. I always like at the beginning of the meetings to just do a little bit of what we call review, preview, and oh my gosh, I just blanked out on
Big view.
Thank you, big view. I say this all the time and I just blanked out on it. So just a kind of reminder of like where we all are as a field right now, what's going on right now. And then just, I don't know about you, but I go to so many meetings that I sometimes go from one meeting to the next and I can't remember what happened at the last meeting. So just a moment to remind folks of what happened at the last meeting and then what's going to be happening today. So next slide. So some of thinking about the big view right now is we are in December and it's right before the short session of the state legislature. And so we're getting ready for that short session. During the short session of the state legislature, there is far less new legislation introduced. And at this point, I believe Kelly, I need to ask Kelly, does it look like we're going to have the firearm legislation, how that concept introduced?
We are still working on connecting with the Armory project in Louisiana for some final details, but I believe Rep. Tran is planning to bring it forward. I know that it's already in the process of being drafted, and we've been having ongoing discussions with our partners all over the state about getting it through this time.
That is so great. Thank you. So Kelly co-chairs our Lethal Means Safety Committee and has really been championing a very important piece of legislation around safe storage. And that's probably the one piece of legislation that we will be part of having introduced and following this upcoming session. But we still really want our legislators to be thinking about mental health, wellness, and suicide prevention, and keeping that top and foremost in their minds. And one really important way to do that is through our Capital Day that we do in partnership with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The next one's going to be on February 12th. And it's a day where you actually come to the Capitol and you get a chance to meet with legislators. It's very empowering, it's fun, and it's interesting. We would love to have people from all over the state there. And the only problem is there are only, Angela, is this right, 40 spaces for it? I think there are 40 spaces for people to come to that particular event. And so if you're interested in doing that, I really would love to have you email me and tell me so that we can get you on the list and begin to help figure out transportation, all those kinds of issues. Next slide. The other context I wanted to acknowledge is that data just came out from the CDC that's national data. And what the data shows is that 2022 provisionally was 3% higher across the country in terms of the suicide rate. Interestingly, though, that's a lifespan rate. And I think people probably are really quite surprised to hear that actually nationally they're projecting that there's going to be a decrease across the country for rates for youth who are 24 and under. So these are the stats I pulled from that. I was really pleased to see that right next to telling that story, there's a link, and I've shared this link here and encourage you all to take a look at it, because what this link looks at is disparities in suicide. So how suicide rates are not equal in every community. That there are disparities for different groups. And this page on the CDC really breaks down the way those disparities play out around ethnicity and race and gender and all the different elements. And I think for those of us working in the field, really important information to keep in mind on. But the one thing I just want to say is I think that there is such a strong narrative around the idea that youth suicide rates have increased. And I think those of us working here are really aware of the tragedy of youth and young adult suicide. And I don't in any way want to downplay the tragedy of that. And I think it's really important for us to begin to tell stories that there's possibilities, things can change. It's possible that we can move things forward. Next slide. Jill, and I didn't know if I sourced this correctly, Jill, because these are directly from your slides. But I just was so struck at our last meeting. We met together in Bend, and many of us got to meet together in person, which was really nice. It was the first time since the pandemic that people had seen each other in person. And one of the things that we did at that meeting is we heard from each of our committees, and we really got kind of a catch up on what all the different parts of the Alliance are doing. And then Jill helped us begin to think about where are we going forward this year with the Youth Suicide Intervention Plan, and what is the latest data telling us. And one of the things that she called out as she was talking about the data is that one of the things to be really aware of, especially in this data around youth suicide, is to recognize that small numbers doesn't mean small impact. That each, especially when we're talking about suicide, each person is a huge impact. And so just as we look at the data, to keep that in mind. But one of the things that you see in this general data is that the youth suicide rate, at least as of 2021 in Oregon, had overall gone down, and that our rank actually, that we are doing better in comparison to other states than we were in 2014, which is when this Youth Suicide Intervention Plan was first created. Next slide. But Jill shared this piece of data with us, which is the actual, and Jill, please feel free to jump in if I say any of the data stuff incorrectly. Okay. That these are the actual numbers of deaths. And if you look across this, if you look at non-Hispanic white youth, you see that in 2018, we tragically lost 95 people. 2021, we lost 59. Still too many, but look at that significant difference between 2018 and 2021. But if you go, for example, to non-Hispanic Black, there's actually an increase between 2018 and 2021. Hispanic, it looks like there has been a much kind of has not been that same kind of decrease. So, and I don't see, this doesn't, there's the Native Americans, right? So there's not the same kind of decrease in every population in the state. And I think the challenge that Jill really raised up to us at our last meeting is that we can make a wild guess that some of what we've been doing has been working for some kids. That's the hope, is that some of these many different strategies we've been working in are part of impacting this number. But something about what we're doing is not getting to all Oregon young people. And the challenge for us as a group that thinks about public policy is, how do we really promote public policy that lifts all boats and has specific strategies that supports all people? Dr. Wolf, I see your hand is up.
No, thank you, and thank you for presenting this data. 2018 may not be the best year to start with, because that was a highly unusual year. 2018 was the #1 cause of death in our youth. And so just like with the previous slide, we looked at 2014 through 2022. I'd be interested in seeing the data longer term with the different race and ethnic groups.
Let's do that as a follow-up. That's a great question for us to look at what the trend has been over the last 10 years as well. Okay, next slide. So all of that, and Kelly mentions in the chat the issue of who's been most helped and hurt by COVID era policies. It's very, you're right. And this is, I think, as we talk about suicide and suicide prevention, we just always have to remember that it is a sticky problem. There's no one cause for suicide, and we need to be able to think in big, complex ways and also be open to elegant, simple solutions. I realized at the beginning, I'm not sure, I did introduce myself that I'm Annette Marcus, and so with that kind of brief picture of where we are right now, I'm going to turn our attention to the rest of the meeting. And during this meeting, we're going to really be focusing and learn from youth and young adults about their current situation and what they are seeing as their needs around mental health. And one of the things I want to lay out at the beginning is that this is in no way intended to be a comprehensive view of all youth in the state of Oregon and what they think. These really are some specific samples and groups of young people that we're hearing from. And my hope is that we will continue to hear from other different groups of young people throughout the year, so that we are directly hearing some of that lived experience and folks who are on the front line. To start with, we want to know a little bit about what you all want to know about this. And I will pass to you, Jen, at this point to send people to the small groups and explain what they're doing there.
Yeah. So we will be in breakout rooms of about 3 to 4, max 3 to 4 humans. And in these groups, it would just be really great if you can kind of think about kind of big picture themes, or even if you have specific detail-y questions that you have around what is it that you would like to hear from our young folks that could help to inform your work around suicide prevention, not just your work in your area, but also too with the Alliance's work. And then but if you are a young person in the room, what do you think it's important for adults to know about supporting you and other young people? And so I guess kind of just for the older folks, 25 and older, what is it that you would like to know from the young folks? And then for the young folks, what is it that you would like those older to know? And just as a reminder, when going back to our group agreements, I believe that this is one of the ones in there when speaking from your own experience. So to keep that confidentiality, so that way young folks can feel safe sharing in their small groups. When we come back to the larger group, not sharing necessarily super specific stories that people have shared unless they've given permission. somebody just put a reminder for me to remind folks of that in the room. So just so that way people can feel safe sharing their personal stories. And so again, like also to only speak to like your experience is really helpful. Laura Rose, you put your hand down. So did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for covering that. I think, yeah, just a reminder that we want to not have people experience, stress or trauma necessarily. So always, one of the things we don't usually talk about are, specific details, methods, things like that. But the experience and what people need to know or hear is so valuable and so important. And as part of our group, the understanding of confidentiality, what's said here stays here, I think is a really valuable consideration. It's one thing to take away kind of the general information, but details important. And also if it, like, I'm a family member, but I wouldn't tell the story of my family member unless I had their explicit permission, so I can talk about my experience in that, say, as a family member, but I wouldn't disclose somebody else's detail without that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura Rose, for that reminder. I think that's really important. We want to use like all the things that we've here to like advocate, and it also can just be that good reminder that to keep within people's boundaries and those so that way we can maintain that respect and confidentiality, and so that way the safety too. So I'm going to go ahead and open these rooms. We will be in breakout rooms until, and then I don't have the agenda in front of me, until like 10 o'clock, you think?
It's breakout rooms go until, no. Yeah, you should give people 7 minutes, I think.
Okay, cool. Sweet. And there's one person, Catherine, I don't know how to not put you in a room, so just don't go into the room, but there's enough people in the space. So, but you should be good. So go ahead and we'll see you in 7 minutes.
Jen, I'm not sure I should join a room.
I put somebody in the room with you intentionally for
Okay.
just in case
Okay, I'll go.
okay.
Hi, Jen. Emmy's having difficulty with hearing us.
And we can't hear her.
Oh. Were you able, I guess if she can't hear them, am I trying to ask her a question?
Oh, technology.
It's really, I'm not a fan of it, to be completely honest. Jacob always, I mean, iRobot is going to happen. That movie is going to be a thing. They're going to take. I'm not able to see if Emmy is responding to my messages. That's so, oh yes, she was able to. Okay. That's so weird. I don't know what to do. I guess, are you, sorry.
Maybe totally log out and log back into the, like Monica said.
Okay, yeah, she is gonna pop out, and then, so I'll go back to the main room so that way I could put her back in here when she comes back.
Okay.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Don't end.
Um,
It's one of those days, you know. I guess I should have gotten this ready. Oopsie oops. Oh, no. Arg. Screen share. Ooh, what did you say? Ah. Is everybody? Oh, everybody's almost back. Here they come. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that, I know that small groups are never long enough. So while recognizing that, I hope that you all had a really great conversation, were able to get to know people on the Alliance a little bit more and share what you would like to be able to hear from youth. And if you're a young person, what you're hoping that the older folks will be able to hear from you about how to best support you. And so I am screen sharing. So I was wondering if we could hear from maybe 3 or 4 people about some things that you talked about in your groups. So to share like 1 or 2 things that you all talked about. Would anybody, I think Genevieve's cat has a lot to say to be able to add to the conversation. We always love to hear from them. So does anybody have anything that they would like to share?
This is Sage. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sage.
I apologize about the background noise. I'm driving, but we had 2 thoughts. One was, asking what students I used to work in schools, what youth would want to hear about, or resources and things that to learn about suicide prevention specifically, and then also what would help students build purpose and meaning in their lives. I shared that some of the students, one thing they say is, what's the point? And I ask, what's the point of what? And they say, what's the point of anything? And they don't know what they're going to do with their lives. There's not a whole lot of things in schools nowadays that have caught up to a lot of the careers being online. And so a lot of young people don't have the career paths to explore in school that feed their individual passions. And so they a lot of times feel like they don't fit into anything of the paths that are more like in-person hands-on things that are not really their bag. And so they feel like, what's the point? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I don't like any of these things. And so we just shared those two things in my group.
Thank you, Sage. That's really important. I think that's something that Annette has talked about too, with like the whole transformation and wanting the culture change around it, because I think that it's important for all of us, and something that all of us can do is to work towards creating a world worth living in. And I think that that's something that the students that you're talking about are really also kind of getting at. So thank you for sharing that and for your group talking about that. Would anybody else like to share some beautiful things that you talked about in your groups? Carlos.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, I'm Carlos. Just visiting today, but we talked about compensation for young people and like the importance of that being in an accessible form of payment, like cash or check versus gift cards. And also defining safety and what safety looks like for each young person and their experience.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Would anybody else like to add to what you, Laura Rose?
But touching on meaningful involvement, which mentioned, and then also the importance from the perspective of young adulthood, the confidentiality, the safety. If there's a safety situation and a young adult discloses to a trusted adult, not having, in the past, I guess it seemed like it would go straight back to the parents or the family where the person might not be safe, but how important it is that there is respect of those safety concerns.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura Rose. I feel like both you and Carlos talked a bit about like that safety piece, which I think confidentiality also goes back to, and just kind of knowing that you can be safe talking to somebody. Is there another group that would like to share? You all stayed in your groups till like the very end, so I know that there were really good conversations going on, but I also know the big group setting can be overwhelming, so no pressure, but to pressure one more group if you all would like to share something. Anybody? Genevieve.
Someone in my group, Jamie shared something that I really thought was awesome, which was that I think it's important to ask youth directly for what they need instead of assuming what they need, which I think is super important. And I talked a little bit about how I think that peer support is something that is really helpful for a lot of youth. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. I think that the safety piece, and even Jill put something in the chat that they talked about that safety and trust. And so it seems like that was honestly that safety and trust is a common theme from everybody that shared. And so I think that safety and trust is important for all humans. And I also think it's just has a little bit more importance for young folks, especially as they're just trying to figure out who they are in the world. And so wanting to know that they have a safe place to be able to like test things and talk about things to people is really important. And so thank you all so much for sharing that with the group. There's more amazing things being put in the chat that I encourage you all to take a look at if you're able to. And I think, Annette, I'm the next person up.
You are, Jen, you are the next person up, and I realized I don't think we officially had you introduce yourself to the whole group.
Well, I will stay mysterious, and my name is Jen Frega. I use she, her pronouns. I work on the Alliance along with Annette, and I am the Suicide Prevention Program Coordinator is my title, and I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so as Annette said, I was going to be talking about some of our focus groups or our think tanks that the Alliance has had. I'm only going to be really going over like some high level themes. I'll talk about a few things that really kind of like stood out from the different focus groups. My hope is to be able to share those and then also talk about some next steps and some action steps that have been taken so far from the focus groups. So if I go over this, the slides will be shared out with the meeting minutes, and before the year ends, all of the information from our focus groups, both like the individual focus group findings and then like the larger ones, will be on our Alliance website. So that way you could really look at them a bit more if you are interested in that. But Annette already went over this, but this just tells you a little bit about the Alliance and who we are. The youth and young adult engagement, we had a conversation around this with the previous youth who were engaged with the Alliance. Feedback that we received was that attending monthly meetings that wasn't necessarily accessible for folks, but they still wanted to be engaged in the work. And they said that attending a one-time focus group could provide them an opportunity to be able to share their input and experience in a meaningful way. So we've had 3 over the last few years. The 2 that I'm going to be focusing on today are the students' perception of Addie's Act implementation and availability of school mental health resources, and messaging for crisis lines, what's working and what can be done better. We recruited a variety of folks from ages 11 to 24. The reason why we went up to 24 is because 1, the YSIPP age, the Youth Suicide Intervention and Prevention Plan, goes up to that. And also 2, so that way we could have folks who are like peer support specialists or who maybe have recently graduated high school or in college. And so just to be able to also hear from them. But we were primarily focusing on K through 12s, mainly because of the 2 topics that we were talking about with the Addie's Act and the crisis lines. We sent out recruitment by email with a flyer, and also was shared to social media to a variety of folks across the state. But recruitment, there's still room for improvement with recruitment. The model that we used, Nicobe Petronelli, who's with OHA, came up with this when she was still with Youth Air and was working with YA. And so we kind of worked together a little bit before she transitioned over to OHA, and that's the model that we stuck with, is the one that Nicobe. So I just always like to say her name whenever I talk about these, because I think it's important. Notes about participation, I just like to touch on this because we did have a small sample size. When you look at who we have compared with all the youth in the state, I understand that it's small. However, the voices and stories that were shared still, I think, are really important, and they have a lot to say about what's going on. I think that a lot of times some of the folks who were in the room didn't feel like they were able to necessarily share their voice while at school. And so this was a space to be able to talk about the different things that they experienced. Ooh, I can't use that button anymore. Okay. So the school mental health resource focus was to gauge awareness of their school suicide prevention plans, policies, and to gather information about Addie's Act implementation. We had 76 attendees, 44% were ages 14 to 17. And then for the crisis line, it was to learn how youth have heard about different crisis and helplines, which ones they've reached out to, hear concerns they have or difficulties in using the lines, and then use the information to create recommendations to OHA. We had 32 attendees and 72% were 11 to 17. We had a lower age that we were looking at for that one. High level findings from the mental health resources one, that teacher and student interactions impact the student's perception of their safety and connection. It's important to have a space to go to when they're feeling escalated or dysregulated. Training and education is vital for both staff and students are also wanting it. Resources are difficult to access at school and in the community, which I think we all understand, especially that community piece. And that universal mental health and suicide intervention screenings could be beneficial. We had a lot of talk about when students have positive relationships with their teachers, because teachers can make a really big difference, that they feel safer, and they often identified those teachers as people that they could talk to when having a crisis. And then the opposite was true, is that when they have negative relationships, they have a difficult time and can often feel isolated. But that teacher interaction and those positive relationships really made a big difference, because again, that was often who the students identified as people they could go to in a crisis. Most of our conversations, and this came up organically, but people said in every focus group that it was important to have a space that they could go to when they were having a hard time, when they were starting to feel dysregulated, when they started to feel a crisis coming on. I understand that we also talked about logistical difficulties of having a space like this, but they were just saying how like having a space to go to where they could use their coping skills and their grounding techniques and just other things to help themselves when they're starting to have a crisis could be really, really beneficial. Some students said that some schools have a place like that, and the schools who currently have places like that, the students said how it was really helpful and that they felt like it was able to minimize having a crisis escalate, because it can be used as a preventative and a proactive measure rather than having a reactive thing happening at school. I saw something come up in chat, so I'm just going to click on that to see if it's a question. Okay. Another thing that we talked about a lot was around training and education. Students said that it's really important for staff to receive education about suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. There was lots of differences in how they thought it could be accomplished, such as integrating it into existing course curriculum, creating a new required course, having extracurriculars that could allow students to become trained, clubs, and sources of strength was talked about a lot. As students where they currently have that at their schools, they found it to be helpful. And so talking about implementing that at other schools as well to spread that. Resources, difficult to access. Students have reported having a hard time easily accessing resources at school. Many acknowledge that they understand that staffing plays a big role in that difficulty with it. Wellness room, that's what I was we were trying to come up with a name. That's it. Thank you, Kirk. And also too, some people talked about just kind of like the difference between having a counselor who is there to like help with college prep and courses versus a mental health related counselor. And then, like I said, as we all know, having those ongoing community resources being difficult to find. We talked about universal screenings. One of the big questions was, why ask us about our mental health if you don't have the resources to help us after, which kind of goes back to that previous slide of saying that just the ongoing community resources are difficult to access. And there was talks about like wanting privacy, like concerns about their classmates seeing how they were responding. And also, even with like some of those concerns, the overall consensus was that they felt that it would help to decrease stigma associated with mental health by also giving both the school officials who are looking at the results a better understanding of where their students are at and what they're going through and dealing with. So that way they could potentially better just provide like different resources and outreach to their students. And Rachel, I will get to that question. I'm not going to answer it right now, but I will get to it, I promise. Our second one is on crisis line messaging. Higher level findings is that there were different sharing practices of resources that were shared from students, but from different schools. Who shares the resources matter. We had a long talk about like calling it like a crisis line can lead some to not reaching out, like it's just a crisis word itself. It would be helpful to have an idea of what happens when you use the line. Not everybody was aware of the Safe Oregon tip line, and that students are more likely to talk with one another than ask for like outside help from an adult or a line. So different folks in the room, the young people, said that sometimes resources are only shared out at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of each term, semester, or trimester, whatever system they use, or at the beginning of each term, and also when a crisis happens. And then a handful of students said that resources are shared out regularly, at least monthly. And the ones who said that they were shared out more often found them to be the most helpful. And also when there's flyers around school. So not only kind of like the verbal reminders, but like seeing the visual ones. The best locations for flyers included bathroom stalls in the office and near counseling spaces. In the bathroom stalls, they felt that it was the most privacy to be able to take a screenshot or to like take one of like those little tearaway thingies from the bottom of the paper. Helpful when students' IDs have information on them. I asked about assemblies because I thought maybe that could be helpful, but a lot of the people said that I just don't go to assemblies. Like that's when they kind of like will leave school. So assemblies aren't necessarily the best place for information to be shared because some students may not attend them. And that there were some schools that have like student leadership and they do kind of like daily updates or announcements, and that resources are sometimes shared through there, which is helpful. Students reported being less likely to receive and use information about crisis and mental health resources when initially shared by like adults. But something that we talked about was like if kind of like the students talk about them and then like adults kind of like do like some kind of reminders or like leave flyers or something, that can be helpful. Calling it a crisis line, again, something that we talked about. It's when we're in crisis or having like mental health difficulties or things are just really hard for us, it can be easy to minimize what we're going through. And so we're like, well, I'm not going through a crisis. This other person I know has has it way worse than me. This isn't that bad. And so we talked a lot about it being important to remember that if they see what they're going through as a crisis, then it's a crisis for them. And so it's helpful, that it's good to be able to reach out for supports like when they're feeling like they need them, because we all have different distress tolerance levels and so we talked about that a bit, but just kind of like what the line is called can impact how people use it. Talked about it being really helpful if they could have like a flow chart of things about like what happens, while recognizing that every time you call a line, it's going to be different depending on like what you're calling for. It's not every time, but there just might be some differences. but kind of seeing if there could be a flow chart or of sorts or types of questions that you'll be asked could be helpful. Not everybody was aware of the Safe Oregon tip line. For those that did know of it, some were worried to use it because of potential police involvement. There were mixed responses and experiences from using the tip line. Students are more likely to talk with one another than ask for outside help because of the worry of making things worse for the person in crisis at home, and also the worry of police involvement. That was something that came up a lot, about just concern with that. Information in addition to being shared here, I also was able to share this at the OHA System of Care State Agency Committee and with the School Safety Task Force. I was able to share it at the School Counselor Association conference, and then with our specific committees. And also I met with the 988 messaging team. So just, that's not me like bragging about who I talked to. That's more just saying that's where the information was shared, and like that the students and the young people who participated in these focus groups, that their voice is being amplified is at these different levels, which is the main point, I think, about having these focus groups. And so with that, while I pull up one of the next steps that was shared, there's a packet of sorts that we're hoping to share out with schools at the beginning of the 2024 year that I'm going to briefly share just to kind of show you what that will look like. The schools committee still has to review it and look at it to sign off on it, because I want to make sure that it fits the needs, but I still just kind of wanted to share it here. Huzzah, let's see. And so there will be a letter just kind of explaining what the heck is this information that I'm sending to them, talking about our focus groups and what's going on. And then I was just going to share, oh, shucks, the different resources that folks said were helpful. So like YouthLine, kind of like talking a little bit about that, how the line can be accessed, just in case people, like, just to remind people, and also where they can get resources to share the information, like YouthLine, the different things that can be shared to kind of promote the line. And then 988, Trevor Project, and then there's going to also be the crisis text line and a couple of others that I was going to share information about. The last thing that will be included in that packet, so sorry for the back and forth, is this thing that you will see momentarily. The specific input from young folks will also be included in there, so that way they can just kind of have just see what exactly it is that youth said is like helpful and not as helpful, just again, so that way that youth voice is amplified and people are able to hear about it and see what they can do to implement some of these things in their schools and with their students to the best of their ability. I know there's a lot of barriers that can come in the school setting, and also just to see like what they can do with these different things. And yes, somebody.
Yeah, Jen, just this and that, just that the top one that says number one,
Yeah.
youth feel dysregulated.
Yeah,
I think we wanted feedback from folks about whether that word dysregulated feels accessible, or if you have thoughts about a better way to say that concept.
Sage, I saw you unmuted. Oh, and in the chat, overwhelmed or unable to deal or cope, maybe more resonant sound. Like, yes, thank you, Rachel. Those are good ideas. And meeting calm and quiet. Thank you for those. Those are, and if you have more thoughts and ideas, please do put them in the chat. I think that the other place where we were going to ask the schools committee for, or your feedback too, for, was around the crisis response piece, just letting the youth could be nervous to reach out because of what may happen after. Law enforcement as part of the crisis team may cause additional trauma. This is not at all meant to I don't know how to recognizing that sometimes the presence of law enforcement can cause additional trauma and just can not necessarily just can cause that. And so wanting to address that while wanting to also acknowledge that sometimes folks find it helpful when they're there. So wanting to acknowledge both. So how we can say that in a way that is kind is, if you all have ideas around that. And then to answer Rachel's question around, yes, there is, and if young people are unable to attend, I try and offer 3 to 4 different days and times for focus groups to adjust. And also I know that not everybody's going to be able to attend those because everybody has lives. So if young folks are unable to attend the focus groups, they can totally let me know, and I can like send them the things that I'll be talking about, and they can like think about it and send me their responses. So that's totally fine with me. I have no issue with that. So yeah, that's definitely something that can be done. And focus groups, future ones, are on pause right now. I just need to iron some things out that I've noticed. And so I want to try and like come up with some things to kind of help address some different things. And so I'm hoping to have our next one in like the March, April-ish timeline of next year. And so if I have a few people that I'm going to be reaching out to for input and thoughts around it, and if you would like to be one of those people, please put your name and email in the chat, and I will connect with you. So that way, if you would like to be part of that, but that is what I have. Do folks have any comments, questions, or concerns?
There's some good feedback. I'm wondering, Rachel, I guess I want to say, Rachel, if you had specific ideas about other ways to reach out, and not just to Rachel, to anybody, we are very open to hearing those like creative ways of hearing and getting youth perspectives.
I think having the opportunity, I'm just thinking about kids who are better articulating and writing, who, are intimidated by groups, those kinds of things. So if they have the option of, answering and writing that's a non-survey, I think that's great. That's pretty much what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
And if folks have like any specific questions too about like the format of like the focus groups, or just kind of where recruitment has been happening, like I said, there's lots of room for improvement with that. But if folks like have any specific questions like that you'd like to ask about or learn more about, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can email me and I can talk with you about that. Because I definitely this has just been kind of like 1.5 or like 2 brains that have been working on this. And I think, and we all have a lot of thoughts so I can always learn from folks. And so I'm always really, really open to that. So just let me know if you have anything that you'd like me to know. I saw that we will be adjusting our schedule just a smidge. So we're going to take a break at this time and then finish up. Yes. So when we come back from our break, sorry, and then I had to read your message a couple of times for it to sink into my brain. So after we take our break, we're taking a break after Clackamas, not right now.
Let's ask the group, it's okay. We can be human and transparent in front of these fabulous people here. Let's do a check-in. Are people ready for a break? Or the other option is that we could take about 15 or 20 minutes and hear from Clackamas County youth right now. So maybe if you can put your thumbs up if like, I need a break. So thumb up, and we will happy to take a break, or we can keep rolling forward.
Let it roll.
Let it roll, let it roll. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone's desperate. All righty, then Jen, get to introduce your Clackamas peeps.
Thank you. So sorry, my brain could just not process for some reason. So thank you for letting us know. We have some folks from Clackamas County, the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Clackamas County, who are in the room with us today, Carlos and Megan, who are going to share with us about some of the really amazing and cool work that they are doing in the county with. I froze, so I assume that I may have froze. Okay, cool. Yep, I saw everybody froze. Okay. Who are doing some really amazing work in the county with youth. They have a youth and young adult action team that's within the coalition, and also just some other really great work that is being done. And so with that, Carlos and Megan, I don't want to talk too much about it and take away from what you're here to share. So I will hand it over to you. Do either of you need to share your screen? Because you have been made co-host, so you can if you need to.
I believe Carlos is going to share.
I will share my screen. Thank you. So, yes, thank you so much for the introduction. My name's Carlos Benson Martinez, and I'm a member of the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Clackamas County. And in my main role, I am the Youth Housing Program Coordinator with Clackamas County Housing and Community Development. And I'll pass it off to Megan.
Thank you so much, Carlos. My name is Megan. I use she, her pronouns. I joined Clackamas County Suicide Prevention Coalition fairly recently, this past July, as an AmeriCorps Vista, moved from the East Coast to be a part of this wonderful community. And I also bring some lived experience to this topic with a history of suicidal ideation and hospitalization.
Okay. Can you all see the slides okay? Awesome. So about the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Clackamas County, the group was launched in October 2018 to bring a community voice to complement and inform the county's suicide prevention efforts. And those are led by Gallie Murray. Most of you probably know, she's awesome. So the Prevention Coalition published the Clackamas County Suicide Prevention Strategic Plan in 2023, which was developed over time with input from over 200 community members, including many people with lived experience. And I'll pop the link to the SPSP in the chat if anyone wants to review. And that document establishes priority areas, strategic directions, and some suggested action items for the coalition.
And these were our identified priority areas by our community. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap in these issues as well. So while these are separate work groups, we tend to mix and overlap a lot in our work as well. So our priority areas are youth and young adults, which we'll be speaking mostly to today. We also have a means safety, all about putting time and distance between someone in a crisis and lethal means. Our community focuses on community-wide education and engagement in this work. And in the new year, we're hoping to really focus on older adults and also bringing this intentional approach to suicide prevention into healthcare settings.
So our Megan and I co-facilitate the Youth and Young Adults Action team, and it's made up of volunteers, county staff, and community partners from different sectors. Here's some examples of organizations that are represented in the Youth and Young Adults Action team or have been at some point. The CESD, Lines for Life, Canby School District, Youthera, Northwest Family Services, ODHS, The Alliance, Westland School District, Lake Oswego's Police Department.
So the goals of the Youth Action Team currently are to increase student ability to identify a peer who may be struggling and knowledge of how to support and when to involve a trusted adult. Increase parent caregiver awareness of suicide prevention. So this kind of speaks to our mission that we're not just supporting youth, we're also supporting those systems and individuals who support this age group. Increase education and implementation of effective suicide prevention activities and strategies, And right now we're really focusing on recruitment of especially more youth involvement in our team. Yeah, so more specifically to reach these goals, to uplift the youth voice, we're actively seeking recruitment opportunities that target that audience, which we'll speak to a little bit more. We're working on 2 apps that will serve as educational resource hubs for suicide prevention and related issues. And we're partnering with some organizations to put on trainings that engage both youth and those who support this age group.
So in terms of recruitment, this is our flyer for the YYAAT, Young Adult Action Team on the right. So we've promoted our group in person at local events. Like Megan recently went to a youth town hall in Happy Valley, and that ended up with some young people reaching out to us. We also distribute the flyer and meeting information via our networks and professional listservs. And we've also partnered with the Clackamas County Youth Action Board to help promote our group on social media. And we have recently seen like a pretty significant number of new recruits coming in. So we're super excited for the next meeting because it'll be an opportunity to introduce some of those folks to this work. And one thing that needs to be added to the flyer that was changed since this was created is that we can compensate young people and all folks of all ages who aren't already being compensated by an agency for their participation. And speaking to our next goal, resource development apps. So inspired by Deschutes County's work with their First Step app, our group is creating one app for youth and one for parents and caregivers to ensure that these different populations are receiving relevant information about suicide prevention and mental health in an accessible and appealing manner. When we started having these conversations, some of the people with lived experience and young people who are in our coalition, they felt like if a young person is seeing like their parent or a support person using an app, that might make it less appealing. So we want to make sure that it's 2 distinct apps. So each group can identify with their specific app. And let's see, so resources, some of the things that are common to both apps are those crisis support resources and information about what to do during a crisis, who to reach out to, trainings about crisis support and things that you can do, general support and suicide prevention education, so learning about how mental health works and how that presents in different populations, postvention work, so what to do after a crisis happens. That's something that we've been tackling as a larger coalition a lot, and we want to make sure to include that in these apps. We'll be including some mixed media, so we've been looking into different forms of media like movies or shows, videos that represent suicide prevention in a way that's relevant to these populations, youth and parents or caregivers, and that we feel will resonate with them and presents the information in a interactive way. And we'll also have the option for our users to give feedback on the app. So if they maybe are having a not so great experience, they can let us know what they'd like to see improve. And if they're having a great experience, they can also let us know about that. And some of the differences that we'll see. So our parent caregiver app will focus on how to support young people in their lives, and we'll include some specific elements about means safety or gun safety, and how to secure items that might be particularly unsafe when a young person is in a crisis. And the youth app will focus exclusively on connection to resources, destigmatizing mental health, and education on best practices. And so our overarching goal is with this app is to remove barriers to accessing services and information that will benefit young people, their parents, caregivers, and the communities that they're part of. And the app format will be discreetly and easily accessed whenever needed. Some of the partners who are working with us on this, Clackamas Education Service District is providing the funding. We're working with an organization called LRIS Mobile Apps, and they're the same company that partnered with Deschutes County on their First Step app. And for the content of the app and the layout, we're partnering with it's mainly led by our youth action team and community members with lived experience. And our goal and date and for app development and getting it out there into the community is the end of the 2023-2024 academic year. And the next phase will be hoping to have students, schools download the youth app on the school technology and supporting promoting both apps at school events and resource fairs.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really exciting project. We hope to have finished relatively soon. Some other cool things we've been working on are some trainings, engaging both youth and the populations that serve them. And specifically, this is a cool pilot partnership kind of with Lines for Life, Westland High School, and Oregon City Service Learning Academy. And I know Hunter Hawthorne is in the room today. He's been really a big part, along with Crystal Larson, in putting this together. So the goal of this partnership is that we are training both school staff and students. By training educators, we're giving them the tools to initiate life-saving conversations, no matter what their role is in that school, because you never know who a student is going to be connected to, what subject resonates with them, and who they'll be willing to open up to if they're in a crisis or struggling. And then by training students, we also, as Jen mentioned in her slides, that students really feel the most comfortable opening up to other students and their peers. So by training students, we're equipping them to be able to navigate these tough situations more successfully, either by themselves or with another peer. So the next phase, Westland High School and Oregon City Service Learning Academy are in slightly different parts right now with who is trained and who still needs to get trained. But in general, our next phase is to train QPR certified youth to become QPR trainers. And this supports sustained youth involvement in local suicide prevention efforts and a peer-to-peer approach for future QPR trainings offered to youth in Clackamas County. Thank you, everyone, leaving wonderful comments. I'm like just getting a glimpse of them in the chat. And we also, as Carlos mentioned, with us being newly able to incentivize people joining our youth action team, we also recognize that any type of work in this field, it's a big emotional and time and energy commitment. And we want to show that mutual respect for our youth that are getting involved in this work. Thank you. And then another slightly newer partnership is surrounding QPR Plus in Clackamas County in partnership with Clackamas Education Service District, who will be funding this training, and Insight for Change, who hosts the training. Clackamas County is planning to host a QPR Plus training by the end of this academic year. What is QPR Plus? It builds on QPR gatekeeper skills training, but this is a customized version that allows for youth ages 12 and older and their chosen family to participate together. And this is so uniquely exciting because by participating together and developing these skills alongside each other, we're helping to bridge that gap that may exist between knowledge and awareness of how to identify someone that's struggling and how to best support that person. And next slide, please. Thank you. And so now we want to get into a little bit about what it's like partnering with youth and bringing youth into the work of suicide prevention and elevating those voices. So I'll pass it to you, Carlos.
Thanks, Megan. And to speak to some of my experience doing this work, I have lived experience as a young person struggling with mental health and suicidality. I lost my mother to suicide when I was 9. And so I used those experiences to become a youth peer support specialist. I did that work for 5 or 6 years until I stepped into my current role with the county. And so some of the work that, or some of the things that I've learned that we have brought into this work leading the youth and young adult action team include supporting leadership. We feel like it's really important for youth to feel like they are equal partners at the table with us. We also support young people with identifying meaningful opportunities to lead. And this is if they're interested in those leadership opportunities. And what is meaningful to them is specific to each youth. And that's something that they will decide for themselves. We don't want to decide like, hey, we feel like this is something that is meaningful, go do it. The stepping into those roles on their own. And we also recognize that every challenge is an opportunity for us to learn and grow together. These opportunities are oftentimes great places for young people to gain skills and learn about these things, but at the same time acknowledging that like we are also learning with the youth, and every challenge and opportunity that presents itself is an opportunity to learn side by side. And we want to make sure that we provide an open door for the young people who are participating in the YYAAT. So we are hoping, or we are supporting young people with evaluating the partnership, giving feedback on how we might be able to improve. We have ongoing conversations with young people about how they need or want to be supported and at what level they would like to be involved in the work. Some youth are super busy outside of this work, so they can only participate in a lower amount. And then other young people, if they have a lot of time, will maybe want to participate a lot more. And yeah, we welcome every different experience or opportunity. And then making ourselves available when questions or concerns arise. So if a young person maybe needs a little bit more context to be on that equal playing field with the adult partners, just making sure that we're taking the time to give that background information, answer any questions that might come up, and yeah, definitely addressing concerns so that the young person feels comfortable participating. And then preventing burnout is super important in this work, both for young people and for us as adult partners. So how we do that is by doing our best to model mutual respect, healthy work-life balance, and self-care. I think these things can be really challenging for everyone. So also just acknowledging that fact is really important. Embracing the fact that in order for us to support others, we must take care of ourselves first. Super important. There's that analogy to making sure that you put on your gas mask on the airplane, or oxygen mask, not gas mask, first, and then help your child or younger person. We recognize that nobody's perfect and we all mess up sometimes. That's super important and something that I'm constantly reminding myself. We strive to be trauma informed, so recognizing that everyone brings their own experiences and that we want to encourage young people to only share what they're comfortable with and be cognizant of how oversharing might impact other young people or people with lived experience in participating. We aim to be flexible and at the same time set reasonable expectations for the young folks who are participating. I think this can be a difficult balance sometimes, because we want to recognize that young people may be experiencing challenges that we as adult partners are not experiencing at the time, and also setting those expectations that are reasonable and make sense to all parties involved. And in terms of creating pathways, so encouraging young people to share what they have learned in this work with their own communities, and that could include friends, families, acquaintances, and recognizing that that piece is critical to facilitating widespread sustainable cultural changes to suicide prevention. So supporting young people with bringing the work home or into their personal or professional lives, and supporting young people with stepping into roles or finding jobs related to this work if that's something that they're interested in doing. Yeah, so that's everything that we had today. Happy to answer any questions if we have time. Yes, and we can put our contact info in the chat too.
Yeah, thank you so much for this platform today and for sharing the space with you guys.
Thank you so much, Carlos and Megan. I knew about the app, and I know that I talked a little bit with Gally about the training, but just to hear you all talk about it in even more detail and provide just extra information, it's just amazing what you all are doing out there. And I think that it really speaks to a lot of what the youth have been asking for. And so I think that it'd be really cool if once with this model, as you all start to do it and implement it in different spaces, to see about like writing it up somehow to spread it across the state, to share, to see if other areas across the state would also be able to implement something like this, because it really does speak to a need that young people have been asking for. And you're getting a lot of thanks in the chat about the amazing stuff that you're doing. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. If you have any questions specifically for Carlos or Megan, please do put them in the chat. We are going to take some time for a break. So we'll come back together at like 10:59-ish, 11, somewhere in 7 minutes. Yeah. And so we'll see you soon. Take a break, stretch those legs, do what you need to do, and we'll come back together soon.
Good morning. I'm Craig Leeds. I use he and him pronouns. I work at YouthLine, but really I'm going to do a little bit less of the talking and defer to the wonderful team that we have here from YouthLine, which includes one of our volunteers and then a few of our staff. Kaylee's going to start us off to make sure you all know about YouthLine. Jen is going to talk a little bit about the issues that we hear most often from the youth who are reaching out to us. Aditi and Rosanna, and then perhaps Jen and Kaylee will also share in response to some questions that Annette posed to us, and then I'll wrap us up at the end by sharing a little bit about some resources that are additional to the YouthLine, and then how you all can get a hold of YouthLine and let your youth know about our resource. So Kaylee, do you want me to share the slides through my computer, or do you want to share slides on your end?
You go ahead. Mine's being sassy.
Okay, isn't that how it works? It's always something. So let me pull up the right thing. And then hopefully I can get that started. Are you seeing the presenter screen or the other screen?
You're good. We're seeing the right one.
Great. Awesome. I'll hand it over to you, Kaylee.
Yeah, awesome. So we just wanted to like kind of start off by giving an overview of what YouthLine is, kind of what we've been doing, where we're at now, just for anyone who kind of needs that base knowledge. So YouthLine is a teen-to-teen or peer-to-peer youth crisis and support service provided by Lines for Life. So we operate a national helpline, but all of our offices are based out of Oregon. And we provide crisis support, as well as just support with any stress or overwhelm via call, text, chat, and also email. All of our volunteers are between the ages of 15 and 24. And they're in the office every day between 4 and 10 Pacific time. So those are the times that we are available for folks to reach out. And all other times, the people that reach out to us will get referred to the adult line or 988 and be able to get support there. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. So YouthLine started in 2000 and was launched at that time. Between the years of 2000 and 2013, we were open only 4 days per week from 4 to 10 p.m. And in 2013, we had 2 full-time staff and 9 volunteers who answered 1,400 contacts, which is super, super impressive. And you can see the picture here is of our old room. Our new room is much bigger than that, but love that little tree on the wall. And then between 2014 and present, we're now open 7 days per week, 4 to 10 p.m. every single day. And we get around 25,000 contacts per year. And then looking at today, so I mentioned that we're a national support line, but that all of our call centers are within Oregon. So we currently have our sort of biggest office is in Portland. It's in the Southwest Portland area. And then we also have an office in Bend, Oregon, as well as Warm Springs, Oregon, where we do YouthLine Native, which I assume Rosanna will be talking about later. And then we're actually opening a new location right now in East Portland at McDaniel High School, which we're super excited about to kind of expand our ability to offer a volunteering opportunity for the folks in that area. Like I said earlier, we're at about 25,000 contacts per year right now. So in 2022, that's what we were looking at. And then in 2022, we also had 192 youth come in and out of our program, but we sit right about like 120 to 130 pretty consistently for our youth volunteers. And in that, our youth completed 23,500 volunteer hours, which is so impressive. We could not do this work without our amazing volunteers, and we'll get to hear from one of our volunteers later. We also have 20 staff supporting our youth crisis response, doing youth development and mentoring, and classroom education and community outreach. So I mentioned this a couple times, but we are a crisis line as well as a support line. So we always say no problem is too big or too small. We don't want to define anyone's crisis for them, define what crisis means for them. And we're happy to support with pretty much anything that youth need support on. So that ranges a lot. Our most common challenge that people reach out about is relationship issues of like friend issues, family issues, anything like that. We also talk about academic stressors, and then some higher acuity or higher risk challenges like suicide or self-harm. We're having trouble with the slides.
Of course, there's always something that happens there.
No worries.
It's funny because my presenter view is still up here. I think we're back to where we need to be.
Awesome. Can you go to the next one?
Yes. And I think we might hand it over to Jen for the next slide.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm one of the supervisors on the YouthLine. I'm a team lead, so I'm a bachelor's level supervisor. So I work with master's level supervisors on the lines, supervising the youth volunteers, helping them take contacts. And so these are some of the most frequent contact issues that come up for us. Mental health concerns being the top one, which can encompass a lot of things, but I think what we see the most on the lines is a lot of mentions of anxiety and depression and things like panic attacks, and a lot of the time questions about what the youth might be experiencing as far as that, and trying to figure out, why am I feeling this way? Is this normal? Lots of questions around that, but also stress and things like that can fall under mental health concerns, which is something that comes up a lot. We also see a lot of contacts reach out about family issues. Something that I've noticed a lot is youth reach out and mention feeling unloved and unappreciated by their family, or feeling unwanted, unaccepted for who they are. A lot of youth reach out and feel like they can't be themselves with their family, and that's a huge stressor for them. Or concerns around divorce, fighting at home, just feeling overlooked by their family, and that comes up a lot and ties into some of the root causes of mental health concerns that youth reach out to us about. So a lot of these issues really kind of overlap or contribute to each other. Loneliness and isolation does also really tie into the relational issues for the youth that reach out to us. Something that I notice a lot is that people feel very misunderstood, like I mentioned before, which really contributes to that feeling of loneliness and isolation. Feeling like they can't go to the people in their life about what they're going through, and that again really contributes to feeling isolated from the people around them. Relationship issues can fall under a lot of different categories, but something that we really see a lot is youth are reaching out about navigating, for a lot of them, their first time being in a romantic relationship. Figuring out what a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy relationship looks like is a huge deal for youth. I think we all can relate to that. It's a big part of growing up, is realizing like how you have healthy relationships with the people around you. So we get a lot of questions about, is this normal? How do I handle this conflict with my partner, regardless of age? And so that's a really big deal, and definitely, again, ties into those mental health concerns, because when youth are struggling with navigating having unhealthy relationships, that really also plays into those feelings of feeling isolated from the people around them, or having those mental health concerns, struggling with anxiety because of the unpredictable nature of those relationships. And again, friend issues kind of ties into that as well. That also plays into the unhealthy versus healthy narrative that is really important to figure out while you're young. Romantic relationship looks like, or how our family relationships impact us. So issues surrounding how important that social interaction is, especially for youth at school or in their personal lives outside of school. And yeah, feeling left out from friend issues is a huge indicator of that loneliness and isolation, and plays into the mental health concerns. So a huge part of this is how much they all really overlap for a lot of our youth. And when we're selecting contact issues, when the volunteers fill out call reports, every contact they have, and click boxes for what topics came up, a lot of these are being clicked at the same time because they're so connected. So yeah, so then just to tie into academic stressors, as I mentioned before, really can feel like a mental health concern as well, but because it's so common and has kind of its own, I don't know, it has its own side of the stress, it does fall into its own category for us. Feeling like they're unable to maintain their grades, or that stress and pressure of balancing academic life and mental health is a huge stressor for a lot of youth. And as I said, again, really highlighting how much these overlap, suicide and self-harm, often these other topics can indicate or be a part of why students are having thoughts of suicide or struggling with self-harm. I think a huge part of why these topics come up is struggling with stress from these other topics. A lot of feeling really overwhelmed by their emotions and feelings, as we were talking about earlier, feeling like those big feelings, that dysregulation from the issues that contacts reach out about leads to not knowing how to cope with those things, because we don't talk about coping skills and we don't talk about self-harm super openly in schools. Maybe that's changing nowadays, but at least when I was young, and I think a lot of the youth that reach out can relate to that, we don't talk about it a lot. And so not knowing how to cope with the stress that's coming from those issues that they're reaching out about, and also that loneliness and isolation really is what leads suicide and self-harm to be such an important reason that people are reaching out to us.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because the next slide is not really useful to be seen. But Annette and perhaps others on the executive committee posted some questions to us at YouthLine that they were hoping that we would consider and perhaps respond to. So Aditi, I don't know if you're ready. Aditi is a member of the Alliance, but also one of our amazing volunteers. And so I'll hand it over to Aditi to share some responses to these questions and just thoughts about her experience on YouthLine.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so I'm actually a lead volunteer on one of our shifts. I've been working at YouthLine for I'm going on my second year, maybe a little bit over a year and a half now. So when we're talking about some of the bigger themes and stuff that we do see on the YouthLine, I think Jen did a really good job of going over a lot of the things that we see specifically. But I mean, in my experience at least, I think a really big thing that shows up is that academic stressor, especially once the school year starts. A really big thing that I see every week is that kind of, I don't know what to do, school is so overwhelming. I can't take a break. My parents are stressing me out. If some people are getting into that college decision season. So some people are like, oh, I'm worried about college. I don't know if I'm ready for college. And kind of just that whole thing, which I mean, in my own life, I can totally relate to too. I'm also waiting for college decisions. So I can definitely relate to some of that stress. So that's a really big thing. And then I think it comes down to familial issues and a lot of the I can't talk to anyone and nobody will listen to me. I don't want to be a burden, which I'm sure we've all heard quite a bit in this work. A lot of people just don't really feel comfortable sharing their burdens with other people because they don't want to be a burden. And yeah, so just kind of guiding people to see how can we support them, and sometimes people just need to talk about it and they don't have anywhere else to go. And a really cool thing that I've seen, especially in the last year, has been I feel like people have been, I don't know how to describe it, but I think things have been very much more open, I guess. I can't necessarily say this for everyone, but in my own personal experience, right? I've seen a lot more people being less, I guess, worried about reaching out, or the potential taboo that comes with mental health is slowly going down. At least I think. I just definitely can't speak for everything or everyone, but in my experience on the lines and in my experience being a high schooler and being involved in different activities and stuff, I've definitely seen some of that kind of go down, and that has been really great. And because people have been so much more open, I think we're slowly kind of paving that road to be in a situation where people feel talking about mental health is a much more positive and safer thing to do. So that's really great. And I think like one thing that when it comes to youth suicide that I've seen that could be addressed is just like, I know we've talked about this throughout the meeting, we've all talked about this quite a bit, is just like having that access to resources. Like on the lines, a lot of the time, there's always like health insurance barriers or parental barriers or barriers for whatever to being able to access that sort of resource like therapy or medication or whatever it might be. And that can be really rough because obviously therapy can be expensive, it can be hard to access. And so that's like a really big thing that I've noticed. And on top of that, like a big resource that I'm always telling my peers to use to like give out kind of is talking about school counselors or talking about like how maybe do you have a counselor or a teacher or someone that you can reach out to that might not be directly from your personal life. And then like the big thing is, oh, they're gonna tell my parents this is gonna happen. Or sometimes the counselors, like I'm sure we all know how heavy the caseloads are, and they don't really have time to really get into like the nitty-gritty that needs to be done. They're focused on like hundreds and hundreds of students, in some cases thousands. So that can be a lot. So I think those are just some big things that I've seen when it comes to barriers in my time on lines. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone or every experience, but yeah, and I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you so much, Aditi. That was wonderful. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your perspective as one of our lead volunteers on the line. Tanvi, who is another one of our volunteers who's also a member of the Alliance, wasn't able to make it this morning, but shared some thoughts that I will just share directly with you. So Tanvi says, as a YouthLine volunteer, I have seen teens reach out to us for a wide variety of mental health crises. I would say that the most fundamental issue that I see with contacts is their feelings of loneliness and feeling like they have no one who they can trust, which is super difficult to hear. However, I think it's something that can be addressed with more resources available to students, especially in schools. I think it is super comforting to know that there would be adults, peers at school who specialize in mental health support, especially because school can be a big source for mental health issues. It would create a safe space and a comfort at school. So those were some words from Tanvi. And then Rosanna, I wonder if you would be able to share any responses to the questions that the Alliance posed to us based on your work in Warm Springs and in Central Oregon.
Yeah, sure. I don't have any youth on the lines currently, but with my experience with going into the schools and talking to them about mental health issues or suicide prevention, and I shared this earlier in our little small group, is I realized that not all youth take this stuff seriously until something bad has happened to their families, in which we don't want it to get that bad. And then the other thing that I noticed multiple times during this discussion on Zoom is that people brought up youth want to talk to youth. So a good thing that I recognized with the Clackamas youth is that they're starting to, they want to train youth to be QPR trainers, which I think is an excellent idea, because I also brought up in our small group that when we had the summer youth workers here, we would utilize them at the radio station to do some of the PSAs, because we realized they don't want to listen to us all the time. So we would utilize the youth to go to the newspaper, or, you know, just having some kind of input into the community where the community would listen to them instead of adults. So I also was wondering, how are we going to get to those youth that are not taking this stuff seriously, because they really do impact some of the youth that are being affected by some of these issues we're bringing up. They don't want to be there because either they're not taking it seriously and they feel like this maybe isn't working. So I don't know. I just have all these different thoughts. So when we're talking about youth camps. And I think that youth camps are a really good place to have a lot of this stuff, because the 9 tribes of Oregon have youth camps and their focus is suicide prevention. But most of the time when they come in, a lot of the youth are willing and able to share a lot of their own personal experiences, whether it's suicidal ideations or attempts and stuff like that, with each other, even though they come there and they don't know anybody, not even the people they came with. But it's easier for them to share with their peers than it is to share with people in their communities or their families and stuff like that. So this is a really good topic for today, talking about all these things, because like I said, being able to get through to those youth that don't take these issues seriously until something bad happens is really sad.
Thank you so much, Rosanna. I really appreciate that. Jen or Kaylee, did you want to add anything else? It's okay if you don't, just want to make sure. And I don't know if Jen Snyder has any additions.
Yeah, Cider's sitting close just in case she gets called in. I would just add, as far as what do I find hopeful about working with young people? Before I worked at YouthLine, I worked with adults, and I honestly used to think that, and I am still a young person, but I used to think that like I didn't want to work with young people because they were like difficult, because I was still young and like came out of that experience of like being in high school, and high school was not fun for me, as it's not for a lot of people. And then when I began to start working with youth, I just realized how hopeful and like beautiful it is to work with people who still have so much life ahead of them. And that's not to say that adults that are in like outpatient services don't have a whole life ahead of them, but a lot of the adults that I worked with, if they had gotten the support when they were younger that I hope to give to youth right now, then I think their situations would be a lot different. And I think that that's been something that's been really powerful about YouthLine, is just for me personally, working at YouthLine has been just really special because of that, like knowledge that if you can connect with a youth and like show them that someone is there and someone's listening, like that can completely change the trajectory of the rest of their life. And I think that that's really special. And that's part of why I think suicide prevention and mental health education for youth is so important. And I also think that plays into the other question of, hold on, I'm pulling it up, of what needs to be different for young people to reduce youth suicide is, yeah, that peer support is so important, and they really are responding to it. And as we've talked about in this meeting so far, they want that peer support. And I think that's so powerful. I also think that it becomes really clear that upstream, like mental health education and suicide prevention is so important as well. Teaching youth where they can get support from a really young age, and talking to youth and parents about mental health really early on makes such a difference.
Yeah, I would just jump off of that. And I also agree, like I did crisis counseling for adults before working with YouthLine, and it's just like such a different environment to be in. But I think one of the most hopeful things about the work for me is like I said, we have like 120 youth volunteers that are just so passionate about what they do, and most of them come from the voice of lived experience as well, and have found a place of recovery within their own lives to be able to support other people. And it's just so inspiring for me that like some of them are 15 and they've been able to like go through their own struggles, find a place where like they're able to cope and recover in their own lives, and then help other people their same age or younger, older, anything like that. Yeah, and it's just crazy to me because at 15 I don't think I would have had that ability, and it's cool to see that change. And yeah.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, I'll just echo, we're so fortunate to work with the youth that we do in our program in supporting other youth. I'm going to share my screen once again, because I think what's important to acknowledge is what YouthLine does really well, is that we have that peer-to-peer support, that teen-to-teen component that is so essential and that we've heard is really useful, and that, you know, teens want to hear from each other. And we know that YouthLine is not the answer for every single person or for every single issue. And so as others have talked about ensuring youth know about their resources, I wanted to share these additional resources as well. So knowing that Lines for Life has a racial equity support line where clinicians of color are supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color with experiences of racism and oppression and discrimination, and providing a clinical response to that traumatic experience. Additionally, Blackline, so Call Blackline, is a crisis line for Black, Indigenous, and people of color that can be accessed with the information that's on the screen. Native and Strong is through 988, is for Native and Indigenous people who are looking for that crisis support. We have some Spanish language resources listed on here. YouthLine provides interpretation by phone for people who speak Spanish, but we know that that's not always the best option. And so we want to make sure that those better options are available and known about. The Trevor Project is for LGBTQ plus youth. And so that information is on here. And then Trans Lifeline is a specific resource for the trans and non-binary community. I will name the Trans Lifeline is struggling a little bit right now. They're about to take a break because their clinicians have been overwhelmed just by all the need with the sweeping anti-trans legislation across the United States recently. If you are looking for some end-of-year giving opportunities, I highly encourage you to check out any of these resources, but Trans Lifeline in particular, because they're really going through it right now, and they're just such a vital service to our community. And then just, we want to make sure you know how to get a hold of YouthLine, in particular the youth in your life. Kaylee is one of our amazing volunteer and youth development coordinators. And so if you know someone in the Portland metro area, in the Bend metro area, or in Warm Springs, someone who is at least 15 and is in that 15 to 24 range, if they might want to volunteer with YouthLine, send them to our website. We also have materials. So I think Jen mentioned this earlier, that if you go to our website, that link is listed toward the bottom, and I'll share these slides so they get shared. We have free promotional materials about YouthLine that we want youth to have so they know about our resource if they need it. So check that out. And then the information for our staff is on the screen. So if you have follow-up questions for anyone who presented today, please feel free to reach out. And just thank you again so much to the Alliance for giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about YouthLine today. And many thanks to Aditi and Jen and Kaylee and Rosanna for joining me to talk about YouthLine.
Well, Craig and the whole team at YouthLine, really so great to hear from you. And thank you for the work that you're doing every day. I'm looking at our time. We're aiming at ending at noon, which is a little earlier than we normally. And I do want to just give a couple minutes in case folks have any questions for the YouthLine people before we switch gears a little bit. I actually had one question for you all, and for those of you answering the phones, are you finding that youth are, when they're coming online, they're identifying their cultural identity to you, or is that something that sort of just gradually emerges, and how is that kind of impacting the way your calls are coming in?
I can answer that. In my experience, I've worked at YouthLine for almost 1.5 years now as a supervisor, so I'm reading every single text chat and listening to calls.
Oh, wow.
I have only notice that people identify their ethnicity or race, if and sexuality, if it comes up or is relevant to what they're reaching out about. So people, it really only comes up if it's like, oh, I'm being bullied for this, or I feel left out because of this, or people don't understand my experience because of this identity. It really only comes up in that way. Otherwise, for the most part, we don't get that information as far as ethnicity and race and sexuality. Yeah, unless it's like relevant to why they're stressed or experiencing suicidal thoughts or self-harm or anything like that. But we do encourage volunteers to ask about pronouns and stuff. So we'll get some, most of the time we'll get gender information, or like pronouns, but yeah.
And I think I'll just add, and thanks Annette for prompting. I had this in my mind to say, and I just forgot. So because we are funded in part by OHA, thank you so much. We have the Real D requirement that all of us do. And so we ask volunteers to send that survey or to ask about sending that survey to our contacts, I think particularly in Oregon. But we get some demographic information from that. We send it out, the response rate is not great, but we have some information in that realm. But as Jen was speaking to, like asking someone's demographic in a crisis contact is not typical. That we'll collect what information that we get in the course of the conversation, but we're not specifically asking questions. And so our data is not as robust as it could be, because we don't have a lot of that demographic information that would help us to see trends across groups who are reaching out to us.
Yeah, I think that's always a challenge. I'm glad you prioritize authentic connection first before data, but it's interesting. Aditi, I was really struck by what you said about feeling like stigma. It sounded to me like you were saying it feels to you like in some ways things have cracked open around young people being able to talk about mental health with maybe less stigma than you had seen before.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's like, at least in my experience, like personally, not like, it's kind of hard to gauge that like on the lines, but like at my high school and stuff, I feel like mental health has just kind of become more of like a commonplace, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, which has been really great to see. Because I think people are just starting to address it as like a normal thing that people need to take care of. But I also go to a school that's like pretty privileged, and like I go to a really good school, so I don't want to like speak for everyone's experience. So.
No, I'm sure it's not everybody's, but I think you've got your finger on something that is an area for us to feel hopeful about and celebrate a little bit about, that we're beginning to normalize mental health care as part of healthcare. Well, I just thank all of you so much for the presentation, and we will send out those excellent slides afterwards. And we're going to switch gears, but it's not really switching gears. It's really building on what are we doing to support youth around the state. And as you may remember, we're at that stage of the year where we update the YSIPP each year, the Youth Suicide Intervention Prevention Plan. And Jill is going to share with us some of the updates and some of the thinking about where we are moving forward from here. I do want to just highlight that at about 10 of noon, you're going to see a Zoom poll come up. And you can do the poll while you're listening if Jill is still speaking. And I should introduce, this is Jill Baker from the Oregon Health Authority.
Thank you, Annette. What's my time?
It's 11:35, and you have really till like 5 of noon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and for sharing the space and for bringing your heads and your hearts to the work. It is beautiful to get to be a part of and to help support. My name is Jill. I am sad if I have not met you. There are more people in the room that I like I feel itchy when I don't know who you are. So let's fix that if we don't know each other. I am alongside Shanda Hosteller, am a youth suicide prevention coordinator at the Oregon Health Authority. I write the statewide plan, report on it, update it, keep track of it, those types of things. So the goals today for our time together, goal one is for me to figure out how to advance my slides. Done. Achieved. Is to let you know kind of where we're at with what we said we wanted to prioritize and get done in the year of 2023. To make sure that you hear about a few areas of strength and to name a couple of barriers that we experienced in 2023 as we're eyeing what might be the next right step for 2024. So the hope is not that we completely throw out everything that we have been working on and say and pick new things to work on, but to ask ourselves, what do we want to stop, start, and continue into the new year within the Oregon Suicide Prevention Framework. So this framework, if these slides will be available too after, if you've not watched the 10-minute video kind of describing the framework, and you are like, what is the framework? I don't understand it. I would encourage you to do that. Everything that we do, that we talk about, is nestled within this framework, and it allows us to stay super organized and make sure that we're attending to all of the ways that suicide can be prevented. Okay. So in 2023, just to give you a sense of what our state, so collectively, all of these boxes in the room, state agencies, the Alliance to Prevent Suicide, the Oregon Health Authority, all sorts of people picked 160 things that they wanted to work on in 2023 collectively. And so I looked back at our list for 2023 and tried to put them into some categories that may or may not be helpful. Oh, and I think I didn't go back and put the percentages in. So there is a typo in the slide. 2 typos. So of those 160, that top line, there are 99 things, lists of our initiatives in 2023 that will be ongoing work. So there are things like Big River, suicide prevention programs, things like YouthLine, things like supporting the work of the Alliance. All of these things are captured in this number, where they're pretty much where we want them to be. They're on track. And that just means that like where we thought we would be able to get to, we have gotten to imperfectly, because we are human people and not Taylor Swift, but they're in good shape. So 62% of the total initiatives are in that bucket. We've got 9 in that bucket of we're in it, we're attending to it. It will continue on into 2024, but it's not on track for some reason or another. We didn't get to where we wanted to be, which represents about 5.5% of the total. The Alliance asked me to try to differentiate kind of ongoing work versus like projects that we work on that are time limited and have an end date. So these next 2 categories are those. The amount of projects that we said we wanted to do that had a time limit attachment to it were 19 of those 160 initiatives, representing about 12% of the total that we're done with. So they will come off the list or change into the next right step because they had kind of bookends around them. And then 9 of those are not yet achieved, and we thought we would be done with them. So that goes into the category of not yet done as well. And then I pulled apart this this category of there's more work to do, but we're on track. So there's these projects that that they don't really fit into the like, this is a part of the regularly scheduled programming that we are doing and will foresee continuing to support. But they're also not like as neat and clean as a project base. So it's a weird category, and I'm sorry that I put it in there actually, because I think it's confusing. And then there's four initiatives that just we're not going to continue on into 2024. And I think I call them out here later. So if you're wondering what those are. So when I bucketed all of them together, where we wanted to be or expected to be, we're on track. Total, all of those categories is 86.5%. So when I added up those categories that were where we thought we would want to be, 18 of the 160 are not where I want them to be or not where we want them to be at around 11%. And 4, we are not going to continue them. We're going to stop doing them. They no longer make sense for the work. So just to give a high level view there. Okay, so the question of what went well, a lot. 86.5% of what we have done in the last year went well. That's good. That's something to be proud of. If you feel tired, maybe that's why. We've done a lot. And so I wanted to ask you all to do, it's called a Zoom waterfall to on this last question. So what you're going to do is you're going to think, what's something that you feel most excited about or proud of from 2023 on our list of what you participated in suicide prevention, and don't put it in the chat yet. Don't put it in the chat yet. Oh, does it include the conference? Yes, it can include the conference. It can include anything that happened in 2023 related to suicide prevention. You're going to type it in the chat but not hit send. And I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, and we're gonna do it all together, and it will be a waterfall of beautiful things. Okay, so you are thinking about what are you most excited about or proud of from 2023. And I'm gonna put mine into, and I'm gonna give you 15 more seconds to finish typing, but you're not gonna hit enter yet. Okay. Does anyone desperately need more time? Okay. If you do, your waterfall can be a drip after the main waterfall. That's fine. All right. We're going to click send in 1, 2, 3, go. The schools report, Latin A considerations, youth focus groups, the conference, the Black Youth Suicide Prevention Policy Academy, Resilience and Power of Youth, LGBTQ mini grant recipients, Place Matters Oregon, adding more colleges to OCUS, the update and expansion of Youth Safe for Behavioral Health, elevating Latin A voice, the conference again, collaboration, the YSIPP was published. If you feel like clapping, you can. The conference again, the Oregon Alliance Coalition grants, expansion of YYAAT and Megan Miller, connectedness, Black Youth Suicide Prevention, LGBTQ, and Coalition mini grants. See, a lot went well in 2023. Thank you so much for participating in that with me. I wanted to make sure and highlight so folks could know kind of like a lot went well. 86.5%, so much beautiful work happened in 2023. Here are some things that experienced some barriers as well that we have our eye on for taking a deep breath, finding new routes, and trying again in 2024. Our team, the OHA Suicide Prevention team, asked for money to fully fund the youth plan and to launch the adult plan That funding request was not included in the 23-25 legislatively approved budget. It means that a lot of our hopes and dreams for what to do in 2024 around adult focused 18 to 24 and on work does not have funding attached to it. That's a significant barrier. We weren't able to find a contractor for staffing our youth engagement work. It's this thing that we continue to be curious about and try to find a good fit who is willing to do it for the amount of money that we have, which is not enough. Third, Youth Save, one of our Big River suicide prevention programs, teaching how to do suicide risk assessments and collaborative safety planning, went out for competitive bid. And that has caused delays, particularly for the Oregon Department of Human Services Child Welfare, but others as well. That was a big bump in the road and caused delays. Almost all of the Caring Contacts initiatives continue to experience barriers in trying to figure out how to get hospitals payment for being able to follow up with someone after a behavioral health crisis in an emergency department. That has been on the list of barriers since 2017, and it continues to be on the list of barriers, and we continue to work at it. And then the other ones on the list are, and look to me like they're more staff bandwidth than anything else, that we maybe picked too many. 160 maybe was too many for some of them. What is not continuing? So these are the 4 that are coming off the 2024 list that I know about so far. And that second one's a little deceptive. It's coming off the list as written, and I'll talk about that in a second. Safe and Strong website doesn't have funding. It had COVID related funding, and so consulted with our team about whether or not it will continue to be a reliable place for information and resources. And so we're gonna take that off the list because the COVID funding has run out. OHA's support for the school suicide prevention and wellness specialists at Lines for Life will move from 5 to 1 FTE. Side note, that position's open. Craig, did you want to put the link to apply to that position in the chat? The Alliance wanted to change their initiative around the Oregon Health Policy Board, and there was a resource for emergency department guides for children and families that hasn't been updated, I think in 4 years. And so because it was a print document, because it's not updated and we don't have an identified champion for that work, it also will come off the list. Talked about the change in FTE. That's related to a change in funding from the Oregon Department of Education. And so we are, the 1 FTE is the OHA's support for that program. We're adding culturally specific suicide prevention initiatives. You'll see a bunch of them in the 2024 list. We just found out we got, please do this survey. We found out that we got a $250,000 grant for Black youth suicide prevention and for Latina suicide prevention specific work. So 2 separate buckets of money. And OHA's behavioral health leadership matched that federal grant as well. And so we're adding quite a few to the list for both Black youth suicide prevention and Latina suicide prevention. We have a couple of new partners from youth serving state agencies that you'll see on the list this next year. You'll see more involvement from my team and Shanda's team in child and family behavioral health around mobile response, stabilization, and early psychosis. Our current OHA current round of federal funding for Garrett Lee Smith ends in June of 2024, June 29th, 2024. So any of the Garrett Lee Smith initiatives on the list have that timestamp on them. And then we added an initiative that will apply to the next round. But it's our understanding that there will be a gap, that the notice of states being able to apply for Garrett Lee Smith is maybe like February. And so the earliest we would get funding would be something like September or October, maybe. That is a quick snapshot of 2023 and looking ahead to 2024. Are there questions that folks have?
Jill, thank you for some of the ways you rearranged some of that. That was, I feel like that's helpful. Just for those of you who've been going to committees, your work around what you wanted to shift or the projects that you're doing this year for your committee will show up in the initiatives this year too. If there's, what's exciting to see with our big old framework is that we're now in a place where every year we can say, okay, what's the next right step, and create the next right step for a year. And it's good to see it beginning to roll out like that. Any other questions or comments? Well, I just want to thank you all for coming, and we may, for the first time in history, end our Oregon Alliance to Prevent Suicide quarterly meeting 5 minutes early. Just wishing, whatever holiday you celebrate, wishing you just a really restorative season, and reach out to people. Don't hear so much, there's such a loneliness epidemic, so reaching out and keeping yourself connected is really important. You are super important and precious, folks. All right, take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.